Thank you for joining us today for the NBA New Jersey Women's Committee February Live webinar. I'm Laura Brandeo, and I'm joined by the amazing Megan Anderson. And today, we have an incredible guest, and we're honored to have her with us. So allow me to introduce you all to Ivy Zelman. She is the CEO of Zelman Associates. She's a highly respected thought leader for housing and housing-related industries. She's been guiding investors and corporate executives towards business success for nearly 30 years. In 2007, Ivy co-founded Zelman Associates, which is a leading housing research firm nationwide serving institutional and private equity investors and corporate executives from the home building, building products, real estate, mortgage, and finance, rental sectors, and more. Okay, she's also the author of that wonderful book that Megan and I were discussing, Give Me Shelter, Hard Calls, plus Soft Skills from a Wall Street Trailblazer. Thank you for being with us, and I will allow Megan to kick us off.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I have been excited to have this call. We are going to be talking about a lot of things that I think a lot of us can relate to. And speaking of your book, my first question that I want to bring up is something that I've related to multiple times throughout my life. And you bring it up in your book, how you thought originally you were going to get into accounting, but then you started to get kind of curious about other options, and you kind of knew yourself at the end of the day as well. And you realized that with my personality type and everything I enjoy doing, that might not be the best fit. And so a lot of us on the call have experienced this as well, feeling like we're just not in the place or going the direction that we're supposed to go. And so I'm curious, for anyone that is struggling with that here on this call, how did you shape shift, and how did you not beat yourself up about it? Because I think oftentimes it can be really easy to kind of beat ourselves up about it.
Well, I think, you have a predisposition to thinking, what you're doing is the safe route or, guaranteed to get a job. So that was sort of my view of getting into accounting. And my dad told me, major in accounting and you'll always, get a great job. And I actually liked accounting quite a bit. I love numbers and I was good at it. But then I started working for an accounting firm as a secretary. And it was an opportunity to work with accountants and ask them, what do you think, do you like what you do? What do you think about being an accountant? And I think that my personality was so inquisitive, and I wouldn't say necessarily bubbly, but I'm definitely a people person. And so a lot of people that would provide feedback would be like, I don't think you're going to be happy in accounting. And a lot of the fact that you're so inquisitive, it's really looking at accounting is looking at the past. You should go into finance because that's really looking at the future. And I didn't really understand the differences at the time, and sort of hearing them say that kind of rocked my world. Like, here I was, I'm definitely getting a degree in accounting, and I thought I was going to be an accountant. So I stopped beating myself up about it because I recognized that it was early enough, to change direction and to pursue what everyone advised me is the best job to get, is a job on Wall Street. So I didn't even know what was Wall Street, so that gave me a goal, and I could be pretty focused and disciplined and had the grit to go after it. So I don't know, I say you don't beat yourself up because, every road, there's always a turn. You can make a left or a right, and you're going to see that, the first job you get won't be your last job. And you have to look at so many success stories where people didn't start out with the initial plan that they thought they would, but they could still be incredibly successful.
Absolutely. Well, my thing that I was very curious about, a couple of things, but one in particular, take us back to 2004. Take us back to where you start looking at the data. You start seeing some things that don't add up. And now here you are giving advice, sharing your thoughts based on your research. And people are literally, I was in the industry during that time, and I remember it very well of the heyday of what was happening. Take us through, how did you get through this? Everyone else going, you're crazy, Ivy. You've got to have lost your mind. Do you see how great the industry is right now? What
Right.
was that like going against the grain and, taking a path where others were not agreeing with you?
It was super hard. I think there was many days I questioned myself constantly, and even tears at times because I was being berated and unfortunately viewed negatively by many people, and people telling me, you just take a victory lap, because we actually, after being cautious in late '04 is when we started really stepping to the sidelines, when we saw concerns around affordability, and recognizing by '05 we started seeing the market begin to correct. And then in '06 there was a perception that we'd seen the worst of it and things are picking back up. And I remember people telling me, just throw in the towel, you had to, you were right, so you should upgrade all the stocks. And I just remember at that point knowing that this was not over. And in all of our lives, when you have some high conviction in something and you believe in it, it's really hard to go against the grain. So I think you have to be true to yourself. But I was really fortunate because I had a lot of industry executives that were boots on the ground, operators that were running, whether it be mortgage entities or they're running brokerage firms or home building entities, that were telling me, you're right, Ivy, this is not sustainable. We're continuing to see ridiculous increases in land prices that we just can't pencil developing, but we're pushing forward anyway. So I had a lot of people that were in agreement with me that helped ground me in my perspective and views. So I wasn't alone. And I think that's something to really convey to everybody, is that, there, whether it be your work colleagues, ask for help, and being able to read the tea leaves. But back then it was really a collaborative effort, and I had a great team of support from my associates, but it was really the boots on the ground every day. I have a great story. This mortgage originator, we were having lunch, and he mentioned that he just gave a law graduate student, approved a loan, and but he doesn't have a job. I said, how do you give him a loan if he doesn't have a job? He says, Fannie and Freddie will buy it from us. It's a fast and easy. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. So when you have that perspective from others that, just completely, is upside down in how you think about things, I think it helps to, again, ground you in your conviction.
So as a follow-up, Ivy, inquiring minds want to know, what about 22? Here we are in this market that, listen, I don't care how long you've been in this industry, we've
Right.
never seen this inventory shortage. We know lots of things are happening. We've got lots of, we've got a Fed meeting. We're speaking about the rates changing. What about now? What are we seeing?
Well, I think that the market at the current levels, it's just not sustainable. And when you think about, the level of home price inflation, which has been, significant in wealth creation, 3.7 trillion of incremental wealth since 2020. And that's all within homeowners' equity now. And that's actually great for the existing homeowner, but the new incremental homeowner that has to pay up to, buy their first home, the challenge is that affordability is being pressured. And even with rates only at 4% right now, 30-year fixed, I think that the shortage is being magnified by non-primary buyers. So in 2021, if you look at existing home sales, they increased 9%. All of it, 100% of that growth could be explained by non-primary, which means really investors, whether private investors looking to diversify from the stock market, institutional investors, as well as fix and flip investors. And you have, therefore, difficulty for primary investors to compete with that. And I think that's causing more inflation. So I think affordability is going to remain pressured. The tightness in the inventory is really reflected in the velocity of home sales. And velocity is defined as homes available for sale at the end of the month and how quickly you sell them within the next 30 days. Historically, it's been about 20% of the homes available for sale sold within the next 30 days. And right now the last report was 56%. And when you think about how fast the inventory is turning, the question is, with even tight inventory, we only saw in 19, I think it was 20 something percent in velocity. So we're seeing warning signs that, we will not be able to sustain this level of true demand, but it's more on the primary side that we see it already moderating. So if we look at the number of renters that convert to home ownership on a quarterly basis, it historically has ran about 2.3 million. And at the end of 2020 and the first quarter of 21, it got to over 2.8 million, which made sense because we saw tremendous pull forward from renters that were afraid to be in apartments and they wanted more space, and mortgage rates were so low, and it was, COVID was all about center stage of your home. That's since moderated to about 2.4 million. And that's, closer to trend line. But at the same time, over that period of moderation, the market's only increased further. So either the primary buyer can't compete with cash buyers and investors, and they're being shut out, or they can't afford it now. It's difficult to ascertain which is it, but we know affordability is going the wrong way. And obviously with significant inflation, even with wage inflation, there's just less money that they'll be able to allocate to shelter, although maybe they'll make tough decisions and allocate more to shelter. But I do think that we're going to start to see demand on the primary side wane. The investor side is a little bit more complex.
Wow.
Speaking of the tight inventory, I'm just curious your thoughts as to when that's not going to be an issue.
Well, it's always not an issue until it is. So when you think about it, in prior periods, inventory as a point in time could change very quickly. If sellers start to get nervous, think about the incremental demand we've had since COVID for second homes. And that's been a huge part of the surge that we've seen. If people, I've got 2 homes, do I really need 2? I doubled my money in 2 years. It's a good time to sell. You can see that change very quickly. Right now, we haven't seen that, but I do think that there's not as much stickiness in that non-primary bucket, which includes not only second home buyers, but the private investors and the institutional money. So I do think that inventory can change very quickly. And even remember, prior to COVID, inventory was at an all-time record low. But at that time, people were saying, well, why is housing so benign if we've got tight inventory? And a lot of that was that sellers weren't able to sell at the prices they thought they should be able to sell at. So there was a bit of a strike going on by the sellers, at least at the higher price points. Entry level was doing relatively well. Now, supply in the existing home market is extremely tight at all-time record lows, but the new supply coming is very significant. The backlog of homes under construction in single family are at a 2006 high, and we are seeing, it looks like a hockey stick, but they're not coming to market because of bottlenecks, starting with municipalities that don't have inspectors. Omicorn's created a lot of absenteeism. So there's a big supply coming. And in multifamily, the multifamily units under development at a multi-decade high. So that new supply will start to create more inventory, but due to the supply chain bottlenecks that we're all familiar with, the number of homes getting completed has actually been under pressure. But at some point, though, that spigot will open up and we'll see a lot more supply coming to the market. Although admittedly, it's more concentrated in the South, Southwest, Southeast, West. It's not supply coming in, let's say, the New York, New Jersey, tri-state area. So those markets might be more immune to any major correction, because the real increase in inventory could be from a change in sentiment where people just start to take money off the table, or they have, again, 2 homes, versus where supply is incrementally going to be increasing. Those markets could have more of a price correction, in my opinion, or at risk.
You really do have to wonder, like you said, that anything can turn it. Because if you think about it, as you were speaking about the second homes, everyone ran out and received, bought second homes because they were working at home and the remote settings. So if things start to shift the other direction, all of a sudden people could be saying, you know what, I have the equity in this home. Maybe I'm not going to be able to go and visit that second home as often because I'm back to the office, right?
And, or it costs a lot more to maintain it. Like I didn't realize how much it was to maintain the second home. And, I've made a lot of money, so I'm worried the stock market is under pressure.
Right.
Maybe we should sell right now. And, alternatively, real estate is viewed that, again, if you own it, to be a good place to hide in an inflationary environment. So it's going to be interesting to analyze. I mean, that's no question about it. It will be a lot can come to fruition over the next 6 months with a hawkish Fed. And then you have
Yeah.
the experts saying that, the economy, while they attempt to tighten and taper, or both, as they contemplate what they need to do to mitigate inflation, you could see the economy slip into recession. And if that happens and the yield curve inverts and rates come, down, not up. So a lot of different scenarios you can play out. But what we know is that today's level of home price inflation is not likely to slow down in an environment where the inventories are as tight as they are and the sentiment is still positive. And the sentiment, though, we have to watch very closely. And we're in the midst of aggregating our broker survey. So just to share some anecdotes with you, reading through it, it was very bullish overall. The sentiment is very strong going into February, but there were some pockets of markets that San Diego, Dallas, Austin, where you started seeing a little bit more inventories taking a little bit longer to sell. People are concerned they just can't afford it. Some commentary just on the margin in Houston, the market seems to be changing a bit. So, are we at the inflection point? I don't know, but what we're really grateful for is the ability not to wait for existing home sales to come out or any other metric that everyone else is actually watching at the same time. We're talking to owners and operators that have, again, we call it weeds in the trees, boots on the ground, to really hear what they're saying on a real-time basis. That enables us to have a better pulse of the market. So just a little tiny inclination to say things are starting to maybe show some signs that rates going up and home prices up as much as they are do matter, but overall very bullish still.
Yeah, right. And you have phenomenal research and data on your website, and what you guys provide is just, everyone should check that out and make sure that you follow what Zelman is putting out. It's phenomenal. Okay, go ahead, Megan. I know we're running out of time and I want to make sure we get in some questions. So go ahead, Megan.
I want to get in some juicy questions.
Yes,
so
go.
First, I posted the link to her book and the website so that you guys can see this. And one question that I have really been dying to ask you after reading your book is all about setting boundaries. So you talk about one of your first job at Salmon Brothers and how your boss started getting a little flirtatious with you, made you a little uncomfortable. And I'm just going to read this in particular here. You mentioned that over time, as your success grew, you developed strategies and set boundaries to what was acceptable to you, stating this is a process every woman needs to carry out for herself. I think being in this industry, being on this women's committee here, and a lot of people on this call, we have dealt with this a lot within the industry. And I am just curious how you got to establishing these boundaries, setting them, and just any words of wisdom that you can give to any of us.
Well, I think, today it's a much more favorable environment relative to when I was at Salmon Brothers. You've got, thanks to Me Too and so many initiatives on diversity, women are finally in the driver's seat and have power. And I think that there's no way that you could have gotten away with the sexual harassment that, my boss got away with. It's just mind blowing for me was the fact that when I was in human resources, conference room, or I was with human resources and everyone was dealing with, finally me confessing to what was going on under duress because anyway, it's a long story. It's in the book, but I think I was amazed because the only strategy they had was to move me out of that department and move me somewhere else, not to fire the guy. And it's interesting because if I hadn't written the book and really thought about it, was my epiphany was like, oh my God, why didn't they just fire him? So now that would never have happened. He would have been fired. And I think that, you learn from life experiences and what's acceptable to you. And, I'm all for, hanging out with the boys and being one of the guys and having some drinks and going out and showing that I'm fun. But, if a guy, touches my ass or, looks at me in a way that I'm uncomfortable with, I'd say that's not cool, and so having the ability to speak up for yourself. And I think it was through practice and having been, harassed, knowing that that's not okay and believing in yourself. So I'd say that it was unfortunately after having had experiences. I also grew up tomboy, in Long Island and, you know, pretty tough chick. So I don't think that there was too many people that would mess with me. But I think it was having self-confidence and at least appearing to have self-confidence that really allowed for me to put those boundaries in place. And people respected me. So it was a combination of, you know, you earned your stripes. You know, you're not here just sort of hanging on someone else's coattails. You know, this woman has established herself even at an early age that she is not going to be, you know, kowtowing to anyone. And I think having some respect allowed for me to have more confidence that I could set those boundaries that were so necessary.
I think that confidence and that self-worth is kind of a major aspect of that. And maybe when when this instance happened, you know, you were just starting out in your career. So do you think that that confidence in yourself and that self-worth, as that developed over time, helped setting those boundaries and make those a little bit easier?
Yeah, I think any, you know, adverse situation makes us stronger. We learn from our failures. You know, when I got fired at Credit Suisse, or Salomon Brothers, sorry, because Salomon Brothers was acquired by Smith Barney, you know, I was devastated, never get a job, crying on the couch. And then I did get a job. And so it was a better job. So I think sometimes you have to fall down to be able to stand up and recognize that our greatest successes come from, unfortunately, sometimes our greatest failures or perceived failures at the time. And I think that experience is actually, you know, the way to forge ahead and learn from your mistakes. And we have to make mistakes, and we have to be willing to go and try things in order to, you know, recognize that you can't be successful unless you're willing to take risk. And, you know, it's kind of like swimming in the deep end without, you know, a raft. You know, you're going to jump in and do the best you can. And, you know, either you could swim to the side of the pool and so you won't drown. But I think you've got to test the waters.
Agreed.
Speaking of taking risks, you just mentioned how imperative it is to success. Do you feel like you've always been kind of an adamant risk taker, or is there kind of a process that you go through in order to take that risk, to feel more confident in it?
Actually, I think I'm more of a risk off person, to be honest with you, just because I think that part of where my career directionally went, I would have stayed at Salomon Brothers forever. They fired me. And I think that that's something about women. We're loyal. You know, we're, you know, willing to give our heart and soul to whatever job we're in. And I think that the reason I was willing to start Zelman Associates was because I was established and I knew I could always find a job. It didn't work out. So it's calculated risk for me, not risk off, but calculated, and having all my ducks in order, very organized and meticulous about the things that I can potentially put in a position where I can lose them. I have to be okay with that. And I think it's the same way if you're investing in the stock market. You know, don't put yourself in a position where that's the only money you have. And if you were to lose it all, you're going to wind up homeless. You know, it's a calculated risk, not risk off or risk on.
Fabulous. All right. Well, Ivy, this has been incredible. We only wish we had more time with you, but you certainly have spoken so highly of giving us insights and given us insights in the market into yourself and being a strong woman leader. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing some time with us. By all means, I highly recommend everyone read Ivy's book. You will certainly connect with many things that she shares in there, and there's some really great information. So thank you once again. And Megan, who's coming up next month?
Next month, we have a very special guest as well.
Bye,
Thank
Ivy.
you. Bye, Ivy.
Bye, girl. Bye.
Next month, we are going live March 9th. So mark your calendars at 2 p.m. Eastern. We are going live with Inge Maskin talking about living your inspired life. And I'm really excited about it. I know that we had some comments in here. We had a comment about not feeling like you're serving your purpose anymore as well. So I think that's going to be a really great call to tune into and get aligned with that purpose as well.
Awesome. Well, I only wish we had more time with Ivy, but she is incredible. I hope everyone enjoyed hearing from her. She is a fabulous, just a master at her craft. So please follow her and get her book and learn more. And we really thank everyone for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.